In the bustling heart of Washington, where the hum of ambition echoes through marble corridors, Karoline Leavitt sat in her office surrounded by neatly organized files and the quiet determination that had come to define her. As the newly appointed White House Press Secretary, Leavitt was a rising star in the political landscape, known for her sharp intellect, unwavering commitment, and a work ethic that left no detail overlooked. Her desk, a testament to her meticulous nature, was covered with reports, policy briefs, and handwritten notes, each one a piece of the puzzle she was assembling for an upcoming Senate hearing. The topic was transportation, a subject that had ignited fierce debate across the nation. Supply chain bottlenecks were strangling small businesses, infrastructure projects were mired in red tape, and flight cancellations were leaving families stranded. These weren't just headlines to Leavitt. They were real challenges affecting real people, particularly in states like New Hampshire, where she had cut her teeth in politics. She was preparing to face Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, whose polished demeanor and media acclaim had made him a formidable figure. But Leavitt wasn't fazed. She was ready to ask the tough questions not for the cameras, but for the people who depended on answers. Karoline Leavitt was no stranger to high-pressure environments. Her career had been built on a foundation of hard work and a relentless focus on serving the public. From her early days in New Hampshire, where she had worked tirelessly in political campaigns, to her role in the White House, she had earned a reputation as someone who didn't seek the spotlight but let her work speak for itself. Unlike many in Washington who thrived on viral moments or clever soundbites, Leavitt's strength lay in her preparation. She believed in the power of facts, in the importance of showing up ready to do the job. As she prepared for the hearing, her office was a hive of activity. Staffers moved in and out, delivering stacks of documents, budget reports, transportation funding allocations, and case studies of stalled projects. Leavitt pored over them, her pen moving swiftly across the pages, highlighting key figures and jotting down questions. Why were infrastructure funds sitting unused while bridges in rural communities crumbled? Why were rail safety upgrades delayed in states desperate for progress? How was the Department of Transportation addressing the supply chain crisis that was driving up costs for families and businesses? These were the questions that kept her up at night, not because they were political ammunition, but because they mattered to the people she served. The hearing was set to be a showdown of sorts, though Leavitt didn't see it that way. For her, it was about accountability, not theatrics. Across the table would be Pete Buttigieg, a political wunderkind whose rise from small-town mayor to cabinet secretary had captivated the media. Buttigieg was a master of perception with a knack for turning complex issues into digestible talking points. His appearances on television were polished, his responses carefully rehearsed, and his charm undeniable. Pundits hailed him as the future of leadership, a young, articulate figure who seemed to glide through criticism with ease. But beneath the surface, the Department of Transportation was facing mounting scrutiny. Supply chain disruptions had worsened, infrastructure projects were lagging, and senators from both parties were starting to ask pointed questions. Buttigieg had a way of deflecting with data and charisma, often leaving his critics grasping for traction. Leavitt, however, was different. She wasn't interested in trading barbs or chasing headlines. She was there to do her job, to represent the public's concerns, and to hold the administration to account. Leavitt's preparation was methodical, almost surgical. She spent long hours dissecting reports, cross-referencing budget line items, and consulting with experts. Her team had reached out to local officials across the country, gathering stories of delayed projects and frustrated communities. In one rural county, a bridge repair had been stalled for years, forcing residents to take hour-long detours. In another, small businesses were struggling to survive as supply chain delays drove up costs. These stories weren't just data points to Levitt. They were the human cost of policy failures, and she was determined to bring them to light. Her folder for the hearing was thick with evidence charts, memos, and detailed questions designed to cut through the spin. She wasn't planning to grandstand or embarrass anyone. Her goal was simple: to ask the questions that needed answers, to shine a light on the gaps between promises and results. What set Levitt apart was her approach. She didn't rely on charisma or media training. Her strength was in her work ethic, her ability to dive into the details and emerge with clarity. Colleagues described her as a force of nature, someone who could distill complex issues into sharp, incisive questions. Her preparation wasn't just about the hearing. It was about honoring the trust placed in her by the people she served. She knew Buttigieg would come armed with graphs and talking points, ready to charm the room with his trademark eloquence. But Levitt wasn't planning to match him in polish. She was planning to meet him with facts. She had watched his previous appearances, noting how he deflected tough questions with a smile and a pivot. She wasn't intimidated, but she was strategic. Her plan was to let Buttigieg talk, to let him lean into his polished persona, and then to pivot, not with rhetoric, but with the weight of evidence. The night before the hearing, Levitt sat alone in her office, the faint glow of the Capitol dome visible through the window. She reviewed her notes one last time, her eyes scanning the pages with focus. Her questions were precise, each one tied to a specific issue: unspent funds, delayed projects, or supply chain failures. She wasn't thinking about the cameras or the headlines that might follow. She was thinking about the people back home, small business owners struggling to keep their doors open, workers waiting for delayed shipments, families stuck at airports because of mismanaged schedules. For Levitt, this wasn't about politics. It was about responsibility. Her folder was ready, filled with facts and stories that grounded her questions in reality. She knew Buttigieg would come with polish and poise, ready to dazzle the room. But Levitt had something else: a commitment to the truth, a record of hard work, and a folder that held the weight of her preparation. As she closed her folder and turned off the desk lamp, Levitt felt a quiet resolve. She wasn't there to win a debate or steal the spotlight. She was there to do her job, to ask the questions that needed to be asked, and to hold power to account. The hearing was tomorrow, and Karoline Levitt was ready not for a performance, but for a moment of truth. She wasn't seeking applause or viral fame. She was seeking answers for the people who had entrusted her with their voice. And as she left her office folder in hand, she knew she was prepared to face whatever came next. The Senate hearing room was a cauldron of anticipation, its high ceilings and polished wood amplifying every whisper and shuffle. Rows of senators, staffers, and reporters filled the space, their eyes fixed on the witness table where Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, sat with his trademark composure. His suit was crisp, his posture relaxed, and his smile carried the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the spotlight. Across from him sat Karoline Levitt, the newly appointed White House press secretary, her expression calm but focused, a folder resting neatly in front of her. The room buzzed with the weight of the moment. Transportation issues had become a national flashpoint. Supply chain delays were crippling businesses, infrastructure projects were stalled, and public frustration was palpable. Levitt, representing the administration but also the public's demand for answers, had come prepared to press Buttigieg on the Department of Transportation's failures. What unfolded was not just a policy debate, but a clash of styles, a moment that would reverberate far beyond the chamber's walls. Buttigieg was a master of the stage. His rise from small-town mayor to cabinet secretary had been fueled by his ability to navigate tough questions with charm and precision. He spoke in measured tones, weaving data and anecdotes into responses that often left critics scrambling. The media loved him, his eloquence, his polish, his knack for turning complex issues into digestible soundbites. But the hearing wasn't about soundbites. It was about results, and Levitt was there to demand them. She began with a series of pointed questions, her voice steady and deliberate. Why were billions in infrastructure funds sitting unused while communities waited for critical upgrades? Why were rail safety projects vital to states like New Hampshire, languishing in bureaucratic limbo? What was the Department of Transportation doing to address the supply chain bottlenecks that were driving up costs for families and small businesses? Each question was grounded in evidence backed by the hours of preparation Levitt had poured into her folder. She wasn't here to grandstand. She was here to get answers. Buttigieg leaned forward, his smile unwavering, and began his response with the kind of polished deflection that had become his signature. He cited statistics, referenced ongoing initiatives, and promised progress with a tone that suggested the issues were under control. The room nodded along, some senators jotting notes, others glancing at their phones. But Levitt wasn't satisfied. She pressed harder, her questions growing sharper. She asked about specific projects. A bridge in a rural county that had been delayed for years, a rail upgrade in a manufacturing hub that had yet to break ground. Buttigieg countered with more data, his voice smooth, his delivery rehearsed. Then, sensing an opportunity to shift the tone, he interrupted Levitt mid-question. "Ms. Levitt," he said, his smile widening just enough to carry a hint of condescension, "perhaps next time you might want to do your homework." The room erupted in chuckles. Staffers smirked, reporters leaned forward, and cameras zoomed in, anticipating Levitt's reaction. The quip was vintage Buttigieg sharp, polished, and designed to steal the moment. But Karoline Levitt didn't flinch. She sat still for a moment, her eyes locked on Buttigieg, her expression unreadable. The laughter faded as she reached for the folder in front of her, her movements deliberate and calm. "Mr. Secretary," she said, her voice even carrying a quiet authority that cut through the room's lingering amusement. "I brought my homework today. Would you like to hear it?" The words hung in the air, and the room fell silent. Buttigieg's smile faltered just for a moment as Levitt opened her folder and began to read. Her voice was steady, each word measured, as she laid out her record of service. She spoke of her work in political communications, her role in high-stakes campaigns, and her commitment to serving the public through clear, honest messaging. She didn't boast or embellish. She simply presented the facts line by line, letting her work speak for itself. By the third sentence, the chuckles had stopped. By the fourth, the room was still, the weight of her preparation settling over the crowd like a sudden shift in the air. Levitt's delivery was not theatrical, but it was powerful in its simplicity. She didn't raise her voice or change her tone. She didn't need to. Each point she read was a testament to her dedication. A career built not on headlines, but on the quiet, consistent work of showing up and getting the job done. The contrast was stark. Buttigieg, with his media-trained polish and carefully crafted image, had leaned on charm to deflect scrutiny. Levitt, younger but no less formidable, relied on substance. Her folder wasn't just a collection of notes, it was a record of her commitment, a reminder that she had earned her place at the table. As she continued reading, the room's energy shifted. Senators who had been distracted now leaned forward, their attention fixed on her. Staffers stopped whispering. Reporters, sensing a moment, scribbled furiously. Buttigieg, for the first time, looked down at his notes, his usual poise replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The moment was electric, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was real. Levitt wasn't performing for the cameras or chasing applause. She was doing what she had always done, presenting the truth, unadorned and undeniable. Her questions grounded in the struggles of everyday people, carried a weight that Buttigieg's graphs and talking points couldn't match. She spoke of communities left waiting for infrastructure upgrades, businesses struggling under the weight of supply chain delays, and families frustrated by a system that seemed to prioritize headlines over results. Her folder, meticulously prepared, was her weapon, not a prop, but a shield of facts. And as she closed it, folding her hands and looking directly at Buttigieg, she delivered a single devastating line. "Your resume was written for the spotlight, Mr. Secretary. Mine was built in service." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, and the room froze. There was no rebuttal, no quick comeback from Buttigieg. He sat still, his usual eloquence replaced by a silence that spoke volumes. The senators, the staffers, the reporters, all were caught in the moment, stunned by the shift. Levitt hadn't raised her voice or resorted to theatrics. She had simply let her work speak, and it was louder than any quip or soundbite. The cameras, which had zoomed in expecting a flustered reaction instead, captured a woman in complete control, her composure a testament to her preparation. The hearing continued, but the dynamic had changed. Buttigieg's responses grew more cautious, his charm less effective. Levitt, meanwhile, pressed forward her questions, unrelenting each one, a reminder that she was there not to play games, but to demand accountability. As the hearing drew to a close, the moment lingered. Reporters whispered about the exchange, already drafting headlines. Staffers exchanged glances, recognizing that they had witnessed something rare, a moment of truth, in a city built on perception. Levitt gathered her papers, her folder still open on the table, and prepared to leave. She hadn't come to win a debate or steal the spotlight. She had come to do her job, to ask the questions that mattered, to represent the people who had entrusted her with their voice. And in that moment, with a single folder and a steady voice, she had turned the tables not with anger or ego, but with the quiet power of preparation and purpose. The Senate hearing room had barely emptied before the moment began to ripple across the digital landscape. Karoline Levitt's calm, deliberate reading of her record, a quiet dismantling of Pete Buttigieg's smug quip, was no longer confined to the marble walls of Washington. Within hours, clips of the exchange were circulating on social media, shared and reshared by users who saw something rare in Levitt's response: authenticity in a world of rehearsed rhetoric. The video, grainy at first, but unmistakable in its impact, captured Levitt's steady voice as she laid out her record of service, each line a testament to her dedication. "Your resume was written for the spotlight, Mr. Secretary. Mine was built in service," she had said, and those words became the spark that ignited a firestorm of reactions. On platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, people didn't just watch the clip, they felt it. It wasn't a takedown in the traditional sense with shouting or grandstanding. It was something deeper, a moment of truth that resonated with anyone who had ever worked hard without seeking applause. The internet moved fast. By the next morning, Levitt's words were everywhere. A small business owner from Ohio posted the clip with a caption, "This is what it looks like when someone shows up prepared." A teacher in Georgia shared it, writing, "I've spent 25 years in classrooms doing the work without fanfare." Karoline Levitt gets it. A college student in California, barely old enough to vote, tweeted, "I don't follow politics closely, but that line hit different." She didn't need to yell to win. The reactions weren't angry or divisive. They were reflective, almost reverent. People saw in Levitt a reflection of their own lives, lives built on quiet effort, on showing up day after day, on doing the work, even when no one was watching. The clip wasn't viral because it was flashy. It was viral because it was real. And in a city where perception often trumped substance, that reality cut through like a blade. Buttigieg's team, sensing the shift, issued a statement the next day. It was short-polished and carefully neutral. "We respect Ms. Levitt's service and look forward to continued collaboration on transportation priorities." It was the kind of response designed to close a chapter, to move the conversation along. But the conversation wasn't moving. The clip continued to spread, racking up millions of views. Comment sections overflowed with praise for Levitt's composure, her preparation, her refusal to play the game of sound bites and spectacle. Even some left-leaning commentators, typically skeptical of anyone tied to the administration, admitted the moment was powerful. A political analyst on a cable news panel said, "That wasn't a performance. That was someone who came ready to do the job." Another wrote, "Levitt didn't just answer Buttigieg. She reminded us what credibility looks like." The headlines followed: "Levitt's quiet strength steals the show." "A folder full of facts outshines a soundbite." For once, the story wasn't about who shouted the loudest, it was about who spoke the truest. What made the moment resonate wasn't just Levitt's response, but what it represented. People began digging into her background, not out of curiosity for gossip, but out of respect for what they'd seen. They found a career built on steady, unglamorous work roles in political communications campaigns and public service that demanded long hours and little recognition. Bloggers unearthed stories of her early days in New Hampshire, where she had worked tirelessly to connect with voters, listen to their concerns, and translate them into action. Social media users shared anecdotes of her engaging with communities not for photo ops, but to understand their needs. A local official from a small town posted, "I met Karoline during a campaign. She didn't just shake hands, she asked questions and followed up." Another user, a factory worker, wrote, "She's not out here chasing clout. She's doing the work." The public wasn't just admiring Levitt. They were relating to her, seeing in her the kind of effort they put into their own lives. The contrast with Buttigieg couldn't have been clearer. His career, while impressive, was built on a carefully curated image, polished speeches, media-friendly appearances, and a knack for turning scrutiny into opportunity. He was the darling of talk shows, the subject of glowing editorials, the face of a new generation of leadership. But as the clip spread, people began to question the substance beneath the shine. His responses in the hearing, once seen as masterful, now seemed hollow next to Levitt's grounded precision. The public didn't turn on Buttigieg with vitriol. They simply shifted their focus. They wanted more of what Levitt represented, someone who didn't need to dazzle because her work spoke for itself. Her folder, that simple prop, became a symbol of preparation, of showing up ready, of valuing results over rhetoric. Levitt, for her part, didn't lean into the attention. She didn't tweet about the moment or appear on talk shows to bask in the glow. When a reporter caught her in a hallway and asked about the viral clip, she smiled briefly and said, "I was there to ask questions, not make headlines." Then she walked on folder, still in hand, back to the work that had always defined her. That restraint only amplified her impact. People noticed. A retiree in Florida shared the clip with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like, not chasing fame, just doing the job." A young professional in Texas wrote, "Karoline Levitt didn't try to go viral. She just did her work, and that's why it happened." The moment wasn't about ego, it was about effort. And that's what made it stick. The lesson of the moment was bigger than the hearing itself. It was a reminder that in a world obsessed with flash viral tweets, polished sound bites, carefully staged appearances, there was still power in substance. Levitt's folder wasn't just a collection of papers. It was a testament to the idea that preparation, integrity, and hard work could outshine even the brightest spotlight. For the millions who watched the clip, it was a call to value the quiet work that happens behind the scenes, the kind of work that doesn't always make headlines, but makes a difference. A high school teacher shared the video with her students, saying, "This is what it means to show up ready. Whatever you do, do it well and let your work speak." A construction worker posted, "I've spent 20 years building things no one notices until they're gone." Levitt's moment felt like that. A young woman studying political science wrote, "She showed me you don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be right." The educational value of Levitt's moment lay in its simplicity. It taught that true credibility isn't built on applause or media hype, but on the consistent, often invisible effort of doing the right thing. It was a lesson for students, workers, parents, anyone who had ever felt overlooked for doing the hard, honest work. Levitt's response wasn't about winning a debate. It was about showing what it means to serve. She didn't need to shout or perform because her preparation spoke louder than any soundbite. The lesson was clear: in a world that rewards flash, the quiet power of substance still matters. It's a lesson to carry forward, whether in a classroom, a boardroom, or a community. Show up, do the work, and let the truth do the talking. As the weeks passed, the clip continued to circulate, but Levitt didn't dwell on it. She returned to her role, fielding questions, engaging with the public, and pushing for accountability. Her approval among everyday Americans, teachers, workers, small business owners, grew not because she sought it, but because she earned it. The moment in the hearing room wasn't the end of her story. It was a chapter one that showed the world what she stood for. And for those who watched it, was a reminder that the most powerful moments don't come from chasing the spotlight. They come from doing the work day in and day out, with integrity and purpose. Karoline Levitt hadn't set out to go viral. She had set out to do her job. And in doing so, she left a legacy that resonated far beyond Washington, a legacy of preparation, truth, and the quiet strength of service.